So my name is Pedro.
My name is Xuedi. We're here to talk to you about Backslash, which is a series of functional devices designed for protests and riots of the future. The goal of Backslash is to retain the right to connect in protest sites through disruptive innovation and the creative appropriation of existing and open source means. Technology has been playing a very important role in the recent wave of protests, from Arab Spring to Occupy Central in Hong Kong. And these technologies can be divided up into two main categories. First, those utilized by the authorities, which consist of sound cannons, water cannons, stingrays, active denial systems. That list can go on, and it keeps on growing. And the second group is those appropriated by the protesters, which is made up of various forms of social media and some DIY protection gear. As you can see here, the scales are really uneven. So by now, most people have heard about the important role played by Twitter and Facebook during the Egyptian uprising, or how Firetrap became the #1 network during the protests in Hong Kong. However, through our research, we found one fact to be extremely interesting that really stuck out, which was that the highest levels of participation seen during the Arab Spring movement were seen during periods of internet and network blackouts. And this happened because besides being young, early adopter, and a digital native, the modern protester really believes that connectivity is a basic human right. So we both come from a design background, and this became a really, really interesting challenge to bring some of these topics to the foreground. And we wanted to create objects and devices that could help start that conversation. And to do so, we created this fully functional and conceptual kit for protesters using open source designs and easily accessible parts. And the devices, from the electronics to the enclosures, everything in the kit were devised with two questions in mind. First, how can protesters communicate safely and retain their rights to protest? And second, how can protesters and journalists spread their messages while evading censorship and surveillance technologies? So Pedro and I both come from a third world country. So we understand very well that it's kind of impossible to develop a one-size-fits-all solution to all of these dynamic scenarios. Not all protests can be like Hong Kong, where the average protester had about 3 devices connected to the internet.
So to start, we decided to develop this new computer-generated pattern that was inspired by the traditional kafia, which is still an important symbol of activism. And this way, you can not only protect the identity of the protester, but also could embed and hidden message in it. So if today a young Iranian activist still face a lifetime in prison just for talking to journalists in the protests that followed the election of 2009, maybe in the future with a bandana and a simple app, they'll be able to communicate with each other. And even through a photo, send a message to a journalist from the New York Times. And I know you guys might be thinking this is just a QR code in a piece of cloth, but actually it's not, because a QR code is a 2-dimensional barcode, and this way all the information is embedded in it, and this way it'll be decoded. But what we develop is a tracker, the hash to the message, just an extra layer of authentication. And here in the top, you can see while you're showing the message #1, if I fold the bandana to the other side, a different message will be displayed. And through the nature of the bandana, I could fold in 8 different ways and unlock 8 different messages. Another technique that's pretty common through the authorities and the police is what they call bottlenecking, where they close certain streets so they can funnel the flow of participants, so like the activists and the protests, they can be beaten or arrested. In 2013, I went back to Brazil, and while joining a protest, I faced many scenarios of extreme police brutality, heavy use of pepper sprays, rubber bullets, tear gas, and even fire guns. So we decided to develop something that was like a network of wearable devices that could notify if a certain area was under conflict. And the way that this works is if someone is in a danger situation, you just press the button, it's kind of like a panic button, and 10 to 15 blocks before they will notify others and all these networks so they could avoid certain area. They could find a different path, they could run. I know that local networks are not something new in protest sites. We've been seeing mesh networks in different colors and flavors. Xuedi just mentioned FireChat. But what we decided to do is to focus on the hardware. We decided to develop a router that was tailor-made for emergency situations, for fast deployment, something that you could just pull the cord and that's it. You could connect even during periods of internet blackouts and cell phone tower blackouts. And one thing that's important to understand in this is we could also connect to the devices that are already developed, and we'd be able to pinpoint in a map even the positions of conflicts. All the videos and the photos from protests nowadays, they are user-generated content. Protesters that call themselves a new independent media, registering the abuse of authorities and documenting political events from inside. But aware of these practices and the power that these images have, sometimes cameras are broken and phones are taken by oppressive forces. So what we decided to develop here is a Wi-Fi enabled drive that people can just upload their photos and connect, in which they strip all the metadata. So nobody can track you down, nobody can have this. And even if your phone or camera are taken, we still can register and have this documented. It's kind of like your personal black box for a protest. Another item that we decided to add to the kit, it's this collection of stencils that was first inspired by this old activity from 2002 they call war chalking. People used to mark down in the pavement like Wi-Fi hotspots. So we decided to combine this idea with the technology that we developed for the bandana. And this way you can mark urban environments and can tell, oh, you should not use your phone here. You have a heavy use of surveillance, or even Stingray, which is cell phone tapping. And the way this works is kind of the same as the bandana. We'd be able to scan, and quickly they'll tell you, oh, you shouldn't be using this, you should be aware. Cell phones became important tools for protesters, even called by some a tool of a revolution. But aware of this, and also that the power of these phones having, protesters are being tracked down, and they become easy targets for possible retaliation. During the protests in Sochi, activists and even civilians that are just close to a certain area of protest, they have the information tracked by Wi-Fi antennas and scanners, and later the state will track them down. So what we decide to develop here is a personal and localized small radius Wi-Fi jammer and cell phone jammer. And this way, they block all the communication that you have from your phone, and nobody can connect from inside and outside. But you can still use all the features of your camera, and you can record, you can still register the protest. So here in the top, you can see I'm showing all the network that are connected at NYU and the floor that we developed. And once I click the button, one by one, all those channels are being blocked to the point that nobody can track my phone anymore. And if I click, I'm back and I can connect it again. I think at this point it's important to mention that we don't have a political agenda. We're not red or yellow. We're not pro-China, Hong Kong. But the heavy use of technology against the protests really made us think, in the future, how would the underground fight back? We believe that in the future of protests, the technology in protest sites is dark. India just started to test drones mounted with pepper spray, and North Dakota just passed a law they're going to be able to do the same with tasers. We didn't start thinking we'd be able to find solutions for all these problems, and we are far from doing that. But we truly believe that Hackerspace, Fab Lab, and even communities like this are a good space to start. We are here to start this conversation. So let's talk.